Hello and welcome to the Frank J. Meitz Maintenance Management Institute, hereafter referred to as the Meitz Institute. The mission of the Meitz Institute is to bring to professional maintenance personnel like yourselves the most modern applications in the maintenance management program through my seminars. In each of my seminars, I will address specific maintenance topics, from fundamentals to management applications that you can use on the job every day. This particular seminar is entitled How to Organize, Manage, and Control Maintenance Stores. And if you would please turn to the index, let me at least walk you through and describe the 9 sections that are in this particular seminar's notebook. Section 1 is the introduction to the maintenance management program. There are many different applications and descriptions relative to maintenance management. We have, over a period of 30-some years, defined maintenance management in 9 different functions or activities, and we will at this particular section review those with you. Section 2 is the development of the asset, equipment, and the related spare parts requirements. This is really the starting point for 3 applications: the inventory management program, the purchasing management program, and the stores management program, which we're going to discuss in this particular seminar. The third element is the spare parts where used list. And this is really a key element for the storeroom, because if the spare parts where used list is developed properly, I will guarantee, if you follow the procedures and the outline that we're going to review in this section, you should not have any obsolescence in the storeroom. The 4th section pertains to inventory management, which is basically driving the purchasing system, which is section number 5, and the byproduct of the purchasing system is the receipt of material into the storeroom or the crib. The 7th section pertains to the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system, and you will see as we move through this seminar how the storeroom is actually integrated with maintenance work order planning and scheduling, and likewise supports the various craft personnel based upon the specific materials, the tools, the equipment, and any documentation that they may require as a byproduct of a maintenance work order. The 8th section pertains to the maintenance work order labor reporting, and here again the storeroom is basically integrated with this particular activity because here we're tracking both all of the parts that are used and those that may not have been used, which will subsequently be returned to stores, plus any equipment, tooling, and documentation that was issued against the maintenance work order, and likewise has to be returned to the storeroom. And the last section pertains to the development of the financial requirements of the storeroom, which really is an integral part of the financial requirements of the entire maintenance management program. Now, before we get into section number 1, which is the introduction to the maintenance management program, I'd like to show you a couple photographs. The first 2 photographs represent a storeroom prior to this company embracing just about all of the applications, the techniques, and the procedures and systems that we're going to discuss in this particular seminar. If you take a good look at these two pictures, you can see that it's almost like working in a disaster area. Now, the following two pictures are the same two aisles that we looked at in the previous two pictures, and you could notice a remarkable difference. No material left on the floor. Material is not protruding out of the various shelves or bins, which is really a safety hazard. And if you look at that floor, you could almost eat off of it. It took this company approximately 5 months to go from before to after. And if they could do it, you could do it. And this is the sum and substance of this particular program. Now, moving into section number 1, I am going to review with you what I consider the 6 types of maintenance management programs that are currently in existence. And I think this will give you an opportunity to review these 6 different programs and compare it to your own and determine where you're at. And if you're up on 1 or 2, that says we have ample room for improvement. If you're at number 3, that says you can enhance your PM program and so forth. So let's start off with item number 1. The first maintenance management program, and it's around in many, many companies, is reactive maintenance, or what I call firefighting. When we move to the second type of maintenance management program, we call that proactive. We're doing some planning, but not in total. We're still involved in a great deal of firefighting. The third is where we have migrated into a preventative maintenance environment, and we're doing full planning and scheduling. And the fourth one is to enhance PM, and that is where we have actually instituted predictive maintenance applications on some of our particular key operating assets. The fifth one is an enhancement of preventative maintenance, and here is where we have actually integrated machine operators into the maintenance program, and as you can see, we call that total productive maintenance, which is TPM, and it is the ultimate goal for PM to migrate through the 5th predictive maintenance and ultimately in to TPM. Now the 6th is my definition of world class. Again, there are many definitions of maintenance management programs and also different definitions of world class. My world class definition is where we have integrated the maintenance management program, and I'll utilize the acronym CMMS, Computerized Maintenance Management System, with what I call the production planning program, which is over in the operations area, and most of those have an acronym MRP2, which is Manufacturing Resource Planning. And the integration of those two, done by one planner scheduler, planning and scheduling both maintenance and production activities, will yield the greatest return on your operating assets. There may be more than one planner scheduler involved depending on the volume of the operation and also the size of the operation. Now, what I would like to do is have you turn to page number 2, and we're going to review those 9 maintenance management functions or activities that I described earlier. Now again, this is my interpretation of the maintenance management program, but having used these 9 functions over many, many years, it really is very easy for people in the maintenance organization to understand where they are within the maintenance management program and how they interrelate their activities with other functions within the maintenance management program. It makes it easy to establish individual training programs for the 9 functions, and it is easy to computerize at the point that you are considering CMMS. So starting with item number 1, this is the starting point of the entire maintenance management program. It is the listing of all assets, which is really the mission of the maintenance management department, and that is to keep those assets at their highest operating proficiency. It includes all of the spare parts that will be required by maintenance at some point in time based upon the frequency of implementing preventative maintenance activities. And the third is the complete listing of all maintenance activities such as PM, PDM, TPM, major and minor overhauls. Now the second function is the equipment spare parts where used list. When we get into section number 3, we're going to show you how that where used list is generated and how it supports the implementation of your engineering change notice system and the execution of an obsolescence program. The third is inventory management. And basically this is addressing 2 questions. When should I order and how much should I order? And when we're in that particular section, which is section 4 of the notebook, we're going to review all of the various inventory management techniques that you may want to consider installing in your inventory management program. The fourth is the purchasing management program, and since 99% of all items, that is spare parts and other related materials that may be used by maintenance, are purchased, it behooves us to consider having full-time purchasing management support. And we'll go into some of the basics relative to purchasing management and how it can support the maintenance program itself. The fifth, which really pertains to this particular seminar, is the warehousing, the storeroom. Some people may refer to it as the crib, the tool room. I'm going to try and make it simple and call it either warehousing or stores. And this is really the culmination of all of the planning of PM and other maintenance activities, supporting that through the inventory management system to make certain that the spare parts requirements are available. Likewise through the purchasing system to make certain that the spare parts, if not available in inventory management, are purchased and brought in on time to support the planning and scheduling function, and to have that material available on hand to either be issued directly to a craft person along with the work order, or deliver the material to the job site. The warehousing and storeroom today is becoming a very critical and key element to support the maintenance management program. It's becoming what I call self-contained. We receive directly into it, we store, we record by bin location, quantity on hand. We support record accuracy through the introduction of cycle counting, and then we subsequently issue material against work orders or ship material out to suppliers for either repair or replacement depending on the particular activity. The sixth element is craft capacity planning, and this addresses the labor content of the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. The seventh is really the key relative to generating planned versus unplanned maintenance work orders, and we're merely going to discuss some of the key elements in this function relative to the interrelationship between maintenance work order planning and scheduling and the storeroom. Number 8 is the reporting by craft labor against the particular maintenance work order. And there are some key requirements like time on the job, observations, findings, and recommendations for operating improvement. And as I said earlier at my introductory comments, it is the return of all of the items that were issued by the storeroom against the work order, and to record the receipt that is the return of all of those items back into the storeroom, and subsequently record those as bin on hand. And last is the financial analysis of not only the storeroom but the entire maintenance management program. Now, if you will turn to the next page, on page number 4, I have duplicated, if you will, the 9 functions, which I'm not going to read with you, but what I'm going to do is to have you follow some of those arrows, which demonstrates the integration of many of these particular functions with other functions or activities within the maintenance management program. The first arrow that I'm going to address is the arrow that is coming out of 7 on the left-hand side and going up to 1. That arrow merely is asking questions like, what is the next asset that we're going to have to maintain? What are the spare parts? What are the labor requirements? And what is the frequency of developing the maintenance management program? It is really the input into the PM, the PDM, and the TPM applications. Coming out of 1 on the right-hand side is a little arrow going to 2, and this is really generating the spare parts where used list. And as I indicated previously, when we get into section 3, I'll identify the importance of that equipment spare parts where used list. The little arrow coming out of 7 going up to 6 in the center of the page is addressing the craft capacity requirements. The other arrow coming out of 7 on the right-hand side going up to 3, inventory management, is addressing the requirements of spare parts. And if spare parts are not available in the storeroom, then you'll notice the little arrow from the center out of 3 going to 4, which is a purchasing requirement. And purchasing issues the POs. It's not shown on the particular exhibit here, but you'll see the arrow coming out of 4 on the left-hand side going to the warehouse, which is an indication that material is being received from the supplier, and depending upon whether the purchase order was for planned or unplanned requirements, there are certain activities that are going to be performed with the receipt of that material, and this is what we're going to discuss further in detail as we move into the stores program. The arrow coming out of 7 into 8 in the center of the page is the actual release of the maintenance work order. Now there's 2 arrows coming out of 8. The one on the right-hand side of 8 going to 7 is all of the reporting activities against the maintenance work order. Also, such things as craft observations, findings, and recommendations. And then last, on the left-hand side of 8 going to 9, is the compilation of all of the different costs relative to not only the work order, but to, or I should say, costs for all of the assets, the inventory analysis, the purchasing analysis, vendor analysis, craft performance relative to efficiency and utilization, and other applications that the management of maintenance and also various other management personnel in the organization would require. So I think you can see from page number 4 that we have been able to demonstrate not only the 9 functions, but identify those functions, but how those functions work in an integrated system. Now, at some point in time, if you're going to computerize the maintenance management program, move towards CMMS, then these functions have another title, and I refer to those functions as modules within a computerized system. So whether you're in a manual environment or you're in a computerized environment, these 9 functions or modules make up the maintenance management program. Now, there are some questions that has to be asked relative to planning and scheduling maintenance work orders. So on page number 5, I've listed the 6 key questions that a planner scheduler of the maintenance work order system would address. The first one is, what will we maintain? Well, the answer to that comes from function 1, which is our equipment or asset listing. What must be done likewise comes from function 1. And as I said previously, it could be a PM, it could be the input into predictive maintenance, total productive maintenance, or it could be the input into a minor or a major overhaul. How long will it take really comes from the planning and scheduling activity based upon the estimated time that the planner scheduler would generate, the estimated time that is generated by, let's say, maintenance supervision, or in some cases, the actual time on a job which is reported by the various craft personnel. How often will we perform the task? There are 4 basic answers to that question. One would come from a shop calendar, which is what I call a fixed frequency. Another one would come from a machine hour reading, which is based upon actual tracking of machine hours that the particular asset was in operation. Another would come from the odometer reading, either on a forklift truck or over-the-road equipment. And the fourth would come from the predictive maintenance program, where we are monitoring through various diagnostic tools the operating limits which has been established in the predictive maintenance program to determine whether or not a maintenance work order should be generated and subsequently scheduled and released. Now, item number 5, who will perform the task? That is a function of the type of experience or craft personnel that are required to support that particular maintenance activity. And last, the 6th question addresses the requirements of spare parts, tooling, equipment, and special documentation. And that is really the responsibility of the storeroom to support the maintenance work order with those requirements where they're actually required against the work order. So you can see that as a byproduct of addressing these 6 questions, the maintenance storeroom becomes an integral part of the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. Now, the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system, as I perceive it, there are 2 types. We have what we call internal planning and scheduling, and then we have external planning and scheduling. On page number 6, we are addressing the internal planning and scheduling relative to maintenance work orders. And what I've done is listed in 6 steps the activities and the data elements that are required for internal planning. The first one is really addressing the asset in terms of what has to be done, what are the spare parts required, and then what are the labor requirements, which is addressed in step 3. Item 2 is to take the data that is from step 1 and generate, number 1, the planned maintenance work order, and then subsequently through scheduling we actually release the work order into the craft personnel. The third, as I said a moment ago, is craft capacity planning, which pertains to the labor content. And again, 1 above is for spare parts planning, 3 is for labor. So you see we've been able to integrate both of those requirements into one internal planning and scheduling activity. Then steps 4 is to release the order, 5 is to get that feedback through the reporting activity, and 6 is actually to track and record all of the costs associated with each and every maintenance work order, whether they be planned or unplanned. Now, on page number 7, we're addressing the external planning and scheduling, and you'll notice the second paragraph, if you will, addresses purchase order planning and scheduling, where if you were to go back to page number 6, here we're talking about maintenance work order planning and scheduling. And as I said earlier, since over 99% of all parts and other related materials are purchased, then we have to develop that full-time, what I call dedicated purchasing support to support the maintenance management program. Now, the first step is addressing the same requirements as we did in the previous page number 6. And in this case, it's addressing the spare parts requirements. Those spare parts requirements will actually be recorded by the inventory management section, which is step 2. If there is insufficient quantity on hand, step 3 is actually planning and subsequently scheduling purchase orders with the vendor base. We issue the POs in step 4. We follow up with the suppliers to make sure that those dates that we require material are going to be met. We receive the material into the storeroom. We go through another step called receiving inspection, which may be new to many of you, but it is becoming an integral part of the storeroom, and we'll discuss that in greater detail a little later. And we update the purchase order relative to the receipts that actually have been counted and recorded. Now, step number 7, if it's a planned maintenance work order, that receipt is applied against the planned maintenance work order, which is really housed in the storeroom. If it is for an unplanned requirement, that means that material will be put into a bin location and will be issued out for future unplanned requirements. And last but not least, in step number 8, again, here we're tracking the financials of those activities indicated above. So if I were to take pages 6 and 7 and put them side by side, 6 on the left-hand side, 7 on the right-hand side, you can see that we have totally integrated the key maintenance management activities that we discussed on pages 3 and 4, and therefore we now are in a position to not only develop our spare parts and labor requirements from page number 7, but be able to track all of the spare parts requirements and support the planned and scheduled maintenance work orders through the external planning and scheduling activity. Now, page number 8 is the input into what I call the maintenance management organization or flow chart. Now, there are 6 pages that actually tie together the activities that we have previously discussed on pages 6 and 7. And they are 1, maintenance work order, planning and scheduling; 2, the inventory management program, 3, the purchasing management program, and 4th, the storeroom program. Now, those 4 activities or functions or programs require full-time dedicated support. Now, when I say full-time dedicated support, I am not alluding to the fact that we need a full-time person, 8 hours a day, let's say, for a shift. I'm talking about full-time support. In a small maintenance organization, and small to me is 20 craft personnel or less, activities 2 and 3 can be commingled and done by one person. In many cases where we have let's say, an organization that has 3 or 4 maintenance personnel, then 2, 3, and 4 can be commingled by one person. And in those cases, the work order planning and scheduling is generally done by the maintenance supervisor. Now, as let's say, expand to a medium-sized organization where my definition is 20 or above and less than 50, then we would start to have full-time people working full-time to support these activities. And where I'm in a very large company, where I have more than 50 craft personnel, we may find that we're going to need several people for these particular functions. So again, irrespective of the size of the maintenance organization, the functions, the activities are the same. The only thing that is different is volume, the amount of transactions, the amount of spare parts, the amount of craft labor that I'm going to plan and schedule. Now, moving into page number 9, we're going to look at the organization charts that I made mention of a few moments ago and see how the individual spare parts and the labor planning is totally integrated through the maintenance management program. On page 9, we're addressing 5 individual activities. Inventory management, which is the spare part planning, capacity planning and scheduling, which is the labor planning portion, and then the work-in process control is the actual reporting by craft personnel against the individual maintenance work orders. The next is purchasing, which is the external planning and scheduling for spare parts. And then the last activity is the warehousing and stores, which is receiving material through the purchasing activity, and then ultimately issuing material against the planning and scheduling activity. So if you would please turn to page number 10, we are addressing what I call maintenance management in the maintenance environment. And basically, this is taking these 5 functions we just looked at in page 9 and putting them into some type of a organization relative to planning and scheduling. Again, starting off at the left-hand box, we have inventory management, just like we had in the previous page, moving to capacity planning and scheduling. The middle box is the work order reporting, and then we have warehousing and stores, and last, the purchasing activity. Now what we're going to do is to look at each one of these functions that are on page 10 individually, and we'll show you the integration of that function with the other functions or activities, and also some of the data requirements. Now, inventory management, which is really on the left-hand side of this exhibit, indicates that it is receiving its input from equipment spare parts list. That's that little block that's underneath inventory management, and that is the byproduct of the spare parts list, which comes out of the first function of the maintenance management program. You'll also know there's another input into inventory management, and that is the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. There are two types of maintenance work orders. Those that are planned, which is identified as 1, and those that are unplanned, which are identified as 2. Planning is a byproduct of preventative maintenance, predictive maintenance, and major and minor overhauls. The unplanned maintenance work orders are those as a byproduct of what I would call maintenance work order requests. Now, all of this data is recorded. That is, the maintenance work order requirements for spare parts are recorded on the inventory management pages based upon part number, quantity required, and date that it is required. If I am in a computerized system, I'm not dealing with inventory pages. I'm dealing, therefore, with inventory records. Same basic, computation occurs. Then we look at the data elements in that inventory management function, like what's on hand, what's on order. Are we sufficiently covering both the planned and unplanned requirements? If not, you notice there's a line coming out of inventory management, and it has a little box associated with it called B. That is really a purchasing requisition or a purchasing request going into purchasing. The box between inventory management and capacity planning and scheduling, A are those maintenance work orders, and again they are identified as planned and unplanned. Now, the work order is really originated by the 7th function in the maintenance management program called maintenance work order planning and scheduling. But A is the data that is flowing out of inventory management to that maintenance work order planning and scheduling activity. And if you now turn the page, we'll take a look at that capacity planning and scheduling activity, and you'll notice that below the capacity planning and scheduling block, there is a block with an arrow going to capacity planning and scheduling, which identifies what we call maintenance operation standards. Now, these are standards that are generated by planning and scheduling maintenance work orders. Many of these standards are estimated, but they're identified in what we call a standards record. And that is a key consideration for the planner, scheduler of maintenance work orders, and likewise maintenance supervision, to develop what we call operational standards. And as similar activities are recognized, moving from one, let's say, asset to another in the PM or other planned applications, those standards will support the implementation of the PM or other activity, reduce the amount of time that is really required to put those PM and major and minor overhaul documents together. There is a communique that comes out of capacity planning and scheduling, item number D, going to inventory management. And see, those are the inventory requirements that I talked about on the previous exhibit, the inventory requirements for spare parts. Item number E and C, coming out of capacity planning and scheduling, are for maintenance supervisors and, let's say, maintenance managers. And the legend on item number C indicates that this consists of a load report and maintenance schedules. As I indicated, D is for the spare parts requirements, And then E consists of 3 individual source documents. A load report, similar to what is in C. The schedule, again, similar to what is in C. But most importantly, the individual maintenance work orders. The maintenance supervision would be those supervisors that are in charge of or responsible for many different craft personnel who likewise have what we call craft supervision. Depending on the size of the organization, you may have several maintenance craft supervisors and only one maintenance supervisor, maintenance manager, or maintenance superintendent. In a smaller organization, those 2 boxes are actually blended together where you may only have one maintenance supervisor. So again, these exhibits can be tailored based upon your specific requirements. Now moving forward to work in process, this is the labor reporting. And the labor reporting, as I indicated earlier in this seminar, is 4-fold. What are my observations and findings while on the job? What are my recommendations for operating improvement? And did I utilize all of the spare parts? And should there be changes recommended to the maintenance work order? And have I returned any unused spare parts? If tooling and equipment and special documentation was released, have I returned those back to the storeroom? So G is addressing all of those items that are to be returned to the storeroom. And F is the actual data that I've just indicated relative to observations, findings, recommendations, and time on the job. And likewise, any changes that should be made relative to the maintenance work order. Now the next activity is purchasing. And here again, the purchasing function is supported by vendor and by purchase orders, which is legend number I. H is the data that is coming out of the purchasing function by following up on maintenance work orders that are planned and where a purchase order has been issued as to support a planned item. Is there going to be any delivery changes? And if there are, then this gives the planner and scheduler an opportunity to reschedule planned maintenance work orders. If the item was for an unplanned requirement, then that material would flow directly into the warehouse and the storeroom, as would planned requirements. And K really is supporting the planner scheduler relative to items that have been received against planned maintenance work orders, so that the planner scheduler is now in a position to take the work order out of a planned state, move it into a scheduled state, and subsequently release that work order to the various maintenance craft personnel. The last activity pertains to the warehousing and stores. And again, the subject for this particular seminar. And you'll notice that kind of elongated box in the center of the exhibit indicates receiving, warehousing, that's storeroom put away by bin location. Material movement is the actual movement of material to the job site, and subsequently shipping, which is returns against purchase orders or a purchase order with material sent out for repair. The boxes M and O are integrated with the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system, and subsequently with the maintenance reporting system. Box O indicates the issuance of material, special tools, equipment, and documentation against the order, and box M is the receipt against the work order for any material that had not been used, tools, and equipment and special documentation. Now, what I've tried to accomplish with these last 5 exhibits is to show you how they are totally integrated within the maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. Section 1 is really my development, if you will, of what comprises a maintenance work order planning and scheduling organization. And also on pages 3 and 4, I've tried to demonstrate the 9 functions, or when you computerize, the 9 modules that comprise the total maintenance work order planning and scheduling system. I have used these documents to train thousands of various maintenance personnel, that is craft personnel, and thousands of maintenance supervisors, planners, schedulers, inventory and purchasing management personnel, and likewise all of the personnel in the storeroom. To date, we have never had a problem with respect to the acceptability of our definition of maintenance management. And we hope that this will provide you with maybe a different look as to what comprises maintenance management, how it actually is developed into a planning and scheduling system when we address maintenance work orders that are planned versus those that are unplanned. Now we're going to move into section number 2 and take a look at some of the data, the documentation that is required to support the start of the maintenance management program, which is the development of the equipment and its associated spare parts lists. And we're going to support that with 3 operating disciplines. We're going to support it with a new part notice system, and that addresses what do I have to do when new assets are introduced into operations and they have to be maintained by maintenance. What happens when we change, let's say, spare parts, and that must be supported through what we call the inventory change notice system. And last but not least, we have that 3rd discipline called obsolescence. So let's now move into section number 2. In section 2, we're going to address data relative to all of our equipment or assets or machines, however you want to identify those, and I just mentioned that a moment ago. So starting off on page 1, we're going to look at the basic data for, let's say, one asset, and this particular outline would pertain to all assets, which basically is the mission of the maintenance management program, and that is to maintain those assets to their highest operating condition. One of the data elements identified by 1 would be all of the purchasing history of the asset. Now, this is wide open with respect to the data that you may want to generate for purchasing history. But very briefly, it would be the OEM name, the location, the phone number, the purchase order that the asset was purchased against, the cost of that particular asset, the date that the asset was received, and other data relative to purchasing history. Step 2 is installation data, and this pertains to, let's say, the load-bearing surface or any other type of data required to install a piece of equipment or asset. 3 would be the operating data, and that operating data would include such things as power required, voltage, current, other applications like pneumatics, hydraulics, H2O requirements, and so forth. The maintenance requirements under step 4 or item 4 would pertain to all of those maintenance requirements that are recommended by the OEM supplier. They would include all of the PM requirements, the major, the minor overhauls, and any other requirements to keep those assets in top operating condition. Item 5 would be the recommended spare parts for those assets. Now, let's differentiate between a asset bill of material and an asset spare parts list. We are not going to have all of the parts in our storeroom to completely build a new piece of machinery. That is a byproduct of the bill of material for that particular asset. What we are referring to in step number 5 is the spare parts that are going to be required at some point in time by the maintenance organization to maintain the integrity of that particular asset. Now, with planning and scheduling, we would not have to maintain all of those spare parts that are recommended for maintenance applications in the storeroom. And therefore, when we get into section 4, the inventory management section, you'll see some of the different applications that will be addressed and how we identify material that is planned from spare parts materials that are unplanned. The sixth step is the dismantling and subsequent movement data relative to a piece of equipment. Many of you are probably moving from the large individual manufacturing departments to cellular manufacturing. And when you start moving equipment around, you're going to need some data relative to item 6 in this particular exhibit. Many of you may be considering or are moving from cellular manufacturing to, let's say, focus factory applications. This is another type of a move. And then there are those very large companies that actually move into various locations for manufacturing applications. Here again, that would require dismantling and movement type data. The seventh function, it addresses all of the maintenance costs relative to maintaining that asset since it was actually received by the company. Now, other costs that would likewise be an integral part of 7 would be downtime costs versus running costs. And again, this is tailored to each and every organization relative to the financial makeup of the maintenance organization. Now, there is never a list that anyone is going to provide you with, including me, that is ever going to be 100% complete. So item 8 says there may be other items that you may want to include into this equipment history asset record. So therefore, please feel free to add additional data into the data required. Now, as we move into the identification of the equipment relative to part numbers and some of the maintenance requirements, we're going to look at that data in page number 2. So the first item indicates the development of EMA identification numbers. EMA is an acronym for the title on the top of this page, which says Equipment, Machinery, Asset. It would be nice to have one part number used by all functions within the organization for an asset. But you and I recognize that in many cases the financial department would have an asset number where we in maintenance may have a machine number. And in some cases, and I still run into that periodically, Operations has an equipment number, which is different from the machine number used by maintenance, which is different than the asset number used by finance. If you have more than one number, my recommendation is to have those numbers become an integral part of the item master record on the same line. Don't have different records, because that's going to require a great deal of cross-referencing, and that's where we start to really have problems when we ask for different reports for these different functions or activities. Now, moving to item number 2, we're talking about an activity which takes a very large piece of equipment or process and breaks it down into smaller functions, and that is modularization. We will be looking at a list of different modularization requirements, and then we do have, as an example, an exhibit on page number 5, which will show you a very large computer-aided design, CAD, computer-aided manufacturing, CAM, the CAD-CAM application, taking this very large computer-driven machine and breaking it down into various assets, which is going to support the development of the PM, major minor overhaul programs, but also reduce the amount of time that is required by craft personnel that are assigned a specific maintenance work order, and being able to go to the job site and immediately execute that particular work order. We also have all of the maintenance requirements as we had developed from page number 1. And then we have our different records and files, and those are really shown in step number 8 down at the bottom of this exhibit, and we'll get to those particular records and files in a moment. But step number 5 is something that we developed many years ago when we provided our management services to companies like yourself, where we took planned maintenance requirements and broke those into 4 different types of activities. The first one addresses the changing of spare parts. The second is the lubrication program for that asset. The fourth is the cleaning required to maintain that asset while it is in production. And the fourth are the safety and health requirements. Now, if you are thinking about moving into TPM, total productive maintenance, you're going to consider what machine operators can do to support the maintenance program. Well, if you look at those 4 elements under item 5, lubrication, cleaning, and safety and health can be natural requirements supported by machine operators. At some point in time when you are going into a physical TPM program, and what I mean by physical is where a maintenance person is supported by an operations person actually performing the changing of spare parts and other related items, which is a true TPM program, then we have developed a program currently up front so that when we're ready to move into TPM, the work orders, the documentation, the instructions are all laid out to be done by one person or 2 or more. And this is a very key element to consider for future maintenance requirements, especially when you want to blend in operational personnel with the maintenance management program. Now, item 6 addresses the special tools, the equipment and documentation that may be required to support a specific planned or an unplanned maintenance requirement. 7 addresses the craft requirements, and then, as I indicated, up above in step 4, we have different requirements of both records and files, and those pertain to those elements as identified in step 8. For every spare part, we need an inventory management record. for those that are purchased, and since 99, if not more, percentage of spare parts are purchased, we need the purchasing record and the vendor base to support that. We need, likewise, the stores system to support the temporary storage of planned items and the storage of items by bin location for those parts that are going to be put in the storeroom for future unplanned requirements. We must identify the craft capacity required to support the asset. Then we have the work order planning and scheduling system, which is addressed by item E, and F is the work order reporting system. And last but not least, we have the financial analysis. If you were to compare the data in item 8, they cover all of the elements in section 1, page 3 and 4, from 3 to 9. You may say, well, where is 1 and 2, Frank? 1 is identified by all of the maintenance requirements in step 3 above, and as a byproduct of that, we can develop the spare parts wear use list. So you see, all of the information that is on page 2 is getting us ready to basically support through the maintenance management program the maintenance of assets. Now, if you would turn to page 3, I've developed a starting point here, a list of the more common assets that you would find in manufacturing and other types of facilities. And this is merely a kind of an input into a part numbering program for assets. We can identify our manufacturing equipment, and my advice is to try and break the manufacturing equipment into the types of manufacturing equipment. And maybe you could precede maybe a 3 or 4 digit number, which could be assigned straight numeric, with a 2-digit number which identifies a specific type of manufacturing equipment. This is going to make it easier when you consider developing PM or major minor overhaul activities, because what you do to one, let's say, punch press is maybe very similar to what you're going to do to others. It will reduce the time that it takes to develop and implement PM programs. Moving on to item number 2, we have different material handling equipment, and then we move into the tool room equipment and item 3. Item 4 is maintenance equipment that is used in the maintenance repair shops, and also it could be mobile equipment such as cherry pickers and forklift trucks and other type of equipment. Item 5 addresses laboratory equipment. 6, R&D, that's research and development equipment. 7 is transportation equipment, generally over-the-road type of equipment here. Then 8 is fire protection, and 9 would be buildings. 10 would be generating equipment, power distribution, and 11 is the grounds, and grounds would include not only grounds from the standpoint of, let's say, grass, shrubbery, and ponds, but also roadways and walkways and anything else, parking lots, that would be an integral part of the grounds. And then again, 12, others based upon developing your own development of a numbering system for your assets. Now, moving into page number 4, we're addressing this modularization of equipment. There are several approaches to modularization. On page 4, we have modularization relative to the craft requirements. And you'll see in a moment on page 5, we have a pictorial diagram of this CAD/CAM machine that I mentioned earlier, which is to support where that particular craft requirement based upon the maintenance work order is to be actually accomplished. So when we modularize on page number 4, we're addressing 1, electrical systems, 2, the hydraulic systems, 3, the pneumatic systems, 4 would be the CAM portion of CAD/CAM applications, and we identify those as computer systems. Then we would have material handling systems as item number 5, and those could be dragline systems as well as overhead conveyors or any other type of material handling that would be found in a manufacturing or other process type company. Item number 6 pertains to the robotics. 7 would be fire protection. 8, water line systems. 9 would be the lighting applications. And 10 is safety equipment. 11 is the heating. And 12 would be refrigeration and cooling. And some people would add 11 and 12 together under their HVAC, heating and ventilating and air conditioning type applications. And then again, 13 is what other modules would you have in your own particular environment? Address those. Now, moving on to page number 5, we have a pictorial diagram of a CAD/CAM machine, and the machine number is 102. Now, you'll notice that around the entire machine, machine number 102 has a suffix which is attached to machine number 102. First, that suffix is preceded by a dash, and that makes it easier to identify that 2-digit suffix. If you would look at the lower right-hand portion of this particular machine, you'll notice that there is suffix 10201 and 10202. Those two units or modules are electrical panels. Therefore, the PM requirements can be developed for those particular electrical panels. The PM work order would identify specifically where those panels are located, and yes, you could even develop a document which is identical to page number 4 for all of your particular assets, which makes it real easy for the craft personnel to go to the job site and immediately execute their particular maintenance work order. Moving to the left, we have 10203, and that's a computer application for this machine. Well, maybe electricians in your shop cannot provide the services to electronic type requirements, so in this case, the craft person required may be electronic technician. And I'm going to just address one more, and that is 10206 on the left-hand portion of the machine, and it has an arrow that goes directly to the turntable, and that says any work that is going to be done in this area must be done by a mechanic. So the two applications of modularization is number 1 on page 4 by function, and page 6 by location of that particular function. And I encourage you to consider developing your own modularization requirement for all of your assets that are very large, that require multi-craft requirements. Now, page number 6 is addressing the numbering scheme for both maintenance and manufacturing. And the first paragraph addresses the, let's say, the equipment number that is found on a maintenance work order, and the same equipment number would be found on the manufacturing routing or process sheet, and that routing or process sheet is actually used to develop the manufacturing order itself. Now, if I use the same number on both of those source documents, at some point in time, when I feel that I have developed all of the data requirements, I've gone through the training and the necessary, let's say, coupling of CMMS, computerized maintenance management system, with MRP2, manufacturing resource planning. Then the second paragraph addresses what I've indicated earlier, which was my definition of world class. With the coupling of those two planning and scheduling systems, I know from experience you're going to gain the highest degree of utilization of your assets rather than have the two systems, that is both the maintenance and the operations planning and scheduling system, be divorced from one another. And the only time that we really start to talk to each other is when there is a conflict to meet either the scheduled date of the production order or the scheduled date of the maintenance order. Now moving in to page number 7, we're going to look at what I call a new part notice system, and this is something that is required as new material, okay, enters the field and, or enters your operation. And in this case, this source document is ready to be used to develop the number of the equipment, the asset number which is used by finance, and then the description of the equipment and its subsequent location. Those are the 4 data elements that are on the top portion of this document. In the upper right-hand corner, we have the date that this equipment record was actually developed and a revision number for that equipment. The revision number is going to be key in terms of tracking engineering change notice requirements. If you are just going to start an engineering change notice system, then my recommendation is start off with revision A, and then as we have engineering changes introduced for a asset, you could change that to revision B, C, and so forth. Now continuing down in the middle of the page, we have what we call maintenance requirements. Now this is not the source document that is going to tell us how PM, how major minor overhauls are to be accomplished. We merely note the different types of PM activities by their particular what I call frequency code. If we have, as an example, a PM that is supposed to be done daily, we would use the word or the letter D. W for weekly, M for monthly, and so forth. That's something that you could develop in putting together what we call shop calendar codes. If certain PMs are to be done by machine or odometer readings at certain periods of time, then you want to list those odometer readings and the machine hour readings as an indication as to when a particular PM activity will occur. The same analogy applies to minor and major overhauls. Here we probably would have in the minor overhaul category, we may have SA for semi-annually and Y maybe for yearly. When we get into major overhauls, we may have 1Y, which says each year, 2Y is every 2 years, and so forth. Again, those are tailored to meet your specific requirements. Then down at the bottom portion, we have a place to record the name of the individual that developed this original source document and the date, and likewise who approved the data, and then any additional recommendations or comments that you may want to record on this source document. One easy one that I can think of is, let's say I have 3 screw machines in a department. Now I have the 4th screw machine. It could be of a different manufacturer, and I would indicate that this is the 4th screw machine going into Department 10, and Department 10 would be the screw machine department. It's merely a quick cross-reference of any source data that you want to have at your fingertips whenever you would look at this particular exhibit. Now, this is the development, okay, the starting point to identify our assets. Now, the second page, which is identifying the spare parts, is located on page number 8. And up on the top, you'll notice we have page and date. We may have more than one page, so that would be the page number, and the date is when this document would be originated. Below, the XYZ paper company, which is where you would put your name as an example and logo, you would have the same equipment number and its revision that came from the previous exhibit, page number 7. Now, the balance of the data pertains to the spare parts, and this is what would precipitate the generation of inventory records, purchasing records, and storeroom records. So you see, the people in the storeroom have to understand where their input is coming from relative to supporting when new documents are going to be generated. That means I'm going to have new spare parts coming into the storeroom, where there are revisions that are going to be generated, and that is, how am I supposed to control revision A and revision B under the same part number, and where there are obsolescence programs that are developed. So this is an integral part of the training that is required by storeroom personnel. Similar type training applications are used and developed, if you will, and implemented to train inventory management and purchasing management personnel, and likewise the planner and schedulers of maintenance work orders. Now, moving to the heading of the body of information that's on this exhibit, I'm going to start at the left and walk from left to right, column by column. I'll identify the heading of the column and then indicate the data element that that column addresses. The first column is headed item number. That is a straight numeric listing of the number of lines that are on a particular exhibit. If there were 10 lines on a exhibit, then we would go item number 1 to item number 10. You notice in the middle of this particular exhibit, we have a page number at the top, I should say. There may be a piece of equipment or an asset that you're going to process an engineering change notice for a spare part. That spare part may be found in different locations in the equipment. Therefore, when an engineering change notice is processed for that spare part, we would want to, on the engineering change notice, not only have the spare part number and the asset that part number is going to be changed, but also the page and the line number associated with that engineering change notice, so that we can make certain when we go from one revision to another for that spare part number, that all of the source documents are going to be updated accurately, and that's the reason for the item number. Now, moving to the right, we have the part number for the spare part. We have the description, and if a spare part was going to be depreciated by finance, they would assign an asset number. We have the UM, which is the unit of measure of the item. We have a class code, which is an inventory classification code, and we'll address that when we get into section 4. You'll also notice we have the ability to determine whether the requirements for the spare part are coming from a planned work order or from unplanned. They could come from both. If it's for planned, we would merely put a P in that column. If it was only for unplanned, we would put a U, and if it were for both, we would have P/U, indicating that the requirement could come from either a planned or an unplanned maintenance work order. We have the quantity of the item, that is, how many of that part is required in that machine. We also have the revision number for that item, that is the spare part, and the date of that particular revision. So the preceding page, number 7, is the development and identification of the asset through its revision system and an indication of the types of maintenance that are going to be required through the planned maintenance work order program. Page number 8 addresses all of the spare parts that at some point in time will be used by maintenance to maintain the integrity of that asset through either the PM or the major and minor overhaul program. Now on page number 9, we have just another equipment record. It's a little different than that which is found on page number 7. And here we have, in addition to the number of the equipment and its description and where it is located by, let's say, building. So this company would be in a multi-facility environment. We have in the center of this document what we call operating data. Now, I'm not going to take the time to read it with you. This is something that you should go through and determine, is this some data that I should consider putting into the first function in the maintenance management program. So use this document as a guideline. You'll also notice that we have warranty information down near the bottom portion on this particular exhibit. And then at the bottom, we identify the spare parts, and you notice there's only room for, I believe, 5 spare parts and its description. And if there were additional spare parts, then there would have to be a second page that would identify the spare parts, just like page number 8 was the spare parts listing for the equipment, which was identified on page number 7. Now, the last heading under spare parts list is the manufacturer's part number. That is the manufacturer of the spare part that supplied the spare part to the OEM that actually you purchased the equipment from or the asset from. One of the things that you want to do is to make certain that you find the manufacturer's name and part number from the asset OEM. Sometimes it's a little difficult to get, but if you record that on the purchase order, that when you're going to purchase the asset or the piece of equipment, then you're going to save yourselves some additional monies, because you know and I know that if you buy spare parts from the equipment OEM, you're going to pay a premium for that spare part. So one of the key issues is to get the OEM's name and the part number for the spare part that the OEM of the asset is purchasing from. And in addition to that, it will help you a little later when you're going to institute what I call vendor stocking programs. Most OEM spare parts manufacturers will set up and work with you on setting up the vendor stocking programs. But most OEMs of equipment will not want to invest additional monies in maintaining spare parts inventory for you. That's another major reason that you want to get the OEM name and number of spare parts. Now, moving into the next page, number 10, we actually have 3 documents here, 3 pages, 10, 11, and 12, that identifies the new item notice information. Now, if you remember earlier when I talked about the equipment heading page, and I said this is going to help to identify the new equipment that you're going to bring into your facility. We require, in addition to that, let's say, header and the spare parts listing for equipment, we need a document called a new part notice form. And the new part notice form would address 2 things: equipment and spare parts. So one of the applications on pages 10 and 11 are all of the data elements that you may want to consider putting on a new part notice document, which actually is in your notebook. It's page number 12, but pages 10 and 11 are the listing of data elements. So let's see if we can't walk through these relative to any identification or interpretation that may be required. I think the part number, the description, and the unit of measure, the first three are quite self-explanatory. Now, item number 4 is the inventory classification code, and like I said previously, we will discuss that in the section 4, the inventory management section. Item 5 is a shelf life code. The shelf life code is originated by the OEM of the spare part, and it's an expiration date. It says don't use it if you are beyond that shelf life code. That is a key element where the storeroom is going to maintain the integrity of shelf life codes, and when we get into the storeroom section, we're going to show you how the storeroom identifies shelf life codes and can protect the integrity of the spare part. Item 6 is the item cost. That is the cost of either procurement or the cost of manufactured. We have the purchase order number and date, and we also have vendor information. Now, vendor information is tailored, and I'm just listing some of the basic information like the name, address, the telephone number, the primary contact relative to trying to get some basic data like shipping information, current pricing, and lead times. And then we have the part number, the description, and again, here's the lead time of the item. Now, the new spare parts list would identify much of the data that we had previously looked at on the exhibit where we looked at the equipment spare parts list, but we basically have some additional information over and above the part number, the description, and unit of measure. We likewise have inventory class code. We could have a shelf life code. Again, we have the vendor part number, which is the cross-reference used in the purchasing function, the vendor description and lead time, and then the item revision number for that particular spare part. Now, moving to page number 11, we have the balance of data that you may want to consider, like the item revision number, the new part notice number, the drawing and blueprints number if required. Now, we're talking about the equipment or the asset itself, the drawing and blueprints required, installation information, some of the same data we made reference to earlier, but here we're going to put this into a source document that identifies when new items are going to be accepted into the manufacturing or the process or operating environment. Again, we have dismantling and moving data, operational information, the recommended PM, the recommended major and minor overhaul, and then the training of maintenance personnel, the training of machine operators, the safety features of the equipment, warranty and service data, and then if we're moving into CMMS, then we want to talk about the different data processing records, which would be the item master and the spare parts list. That would go into function 1 of the maintenance program. Inventory management data would go into function number 3. Stores and warehousing would go into function 5. Purchasing would go into function number 4. The maintenance work order planning and scheduling activity would go into number 7. And all of the financial information for that equipment or asset would go into function number 9. And then again, we have installation data and operational data and any other information that you require for a new item, whether it's a new spare part or it is a new piece of equipment or asset. Now, moving on to page number 12, we're identifying the document that we call the new item notice, or some people refer to it as a new part notice. You pick and choose. But again, we have the date, and then that NIN number is the new item notice number. It is a straight numeric listing. It's very similar to a purchase order number of the number of new items that I have received into operations, let's say year to date. So if I had let's say a year code, which is a 2-digit number, and then that would be followed by maybe a 4-digit number. The 2-digit prefix would be the year code, and the last 4 digits would be identified and recorded as straight numeric, but progression by 1. And again, I'm not going to read all of this data for you. We've covered it on the preceding 2 pages. But here is one company's layout for a new item notice form. And all of the data, and the data that is not recorded on this document, can be put subsequently on page 2 for this document. And then it is this data that is going to be recorded, whether it's a manual system or it's going to be the input device into a CMMS program for all new pieces of equipment. What we're doing here with this document is we're developing the first function of the maintenance management program, the identification of the asset, the identification of all of the spare parts that are going to be used by maintenance at some point in time, and the identification of how that asset is going to be maintained. Now, moving to page number 13, we have again a listing of data for the engineering change notice system. And let's take a look at some of the data here in case there is anything that requires some further definition. The part number, the description, the unit of measure, I think those are identifiable. The reason for the change, now that's something that we'd have to record. Are we making a change because we can, let's say, have additional operational life, or maybe it's a cost reduction application, or we're having another item be introduced into that particular piece of equipment that is going to increase the speed and the feed, the quality of the product if it's a manufacturing piece of equipment, and so forth. Now, step 5 addresses the questions of the design, feature of the equipment, and that would be more operational, speeds and feeds and temperature or any other application relative to changing the asset. 5B, I'm using the term bill of material, and I've identified that earlier, are the spare parts for that asset that is going to be used by maintenance to maintain the equipment. Then, will it change the maintenance process itself, or will it change the cost of the item relative to the overhead to maintain the asset? And you could add additional, items to item number 5 to tailor it to your requirement. Item 6 pertains to the parts that can be affected by the engineering change notice. It may be one part, or it may be 2 or more. If parts are going to be affected, we have to determine if we have any inventory on hand, and if we have what we call a mandatory change, which says you cannot use any material on hand, then item number 8 addresses the disposition of that inventory. Are there any open orders for that particular spare part? And merely what we're addressing is if we have nothing on hand, is there something on order? And if it is a mandatory change, then we may have to cancel that particular purchase order, or it could be a manufactured part, and issue a new order for the revised item once it is complete through the engineering change notice program. Likewise, the costs related to the engineering change. Now, I did identify inventory disposition, but what about labor? If we change, as an example, the maintenance process that I identified in 5C above, is it going to give us some cost savings relative to the labor of craft personnel while working on various maintenance work orders on that asset? Material changes would address the spare parts relative to the new revision. Then we would have to identify, will the engineering change necessitate a change on any tooling and equipment, or will there be other types of changes that may incur outside contractor support? And last, would we require engineering support, which would come out of basically facilities engineering, if it did not come out of the contractor portion of this ECN? We have item 12, the ECN number itself. We have the current revision, and let's assume that is revision A. The new revision number on item 14 would now be revision B. The effective date of the engineering change notice, if it was a mandatory change, the date would be today. If it was a running change where we could use the material up, then we would have to determine through the inventory system at what point would we use all of the material that is either on hand or on order, and then we would develop what we call an effective date where the new revision would become the standard bearer for this particular item. The originator of the engineering change on 16, and then last, all of the approvals that may be required in your operation to process and ultimately complete the engineering change notice. Now, on page number 14, we've identified the engineering change notice form. It has identical information that we've discussed on page number 13, except you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner we have the date of the engineering change, and then we have the engineering change notice number. Now, that's not the revision number. Similar to the new item notice number, we may want to consider a 5 or a 6-digit number. And again, the first 2 digits, the prefix, would identify the year that we're recording engineering change notices. And then we could start off with either a 3 or a 4-digit numbering scheme, which would address in numeric sequence and again progression by 1 the engineering changes that have been processed year to date. And that supports management questions relative to how many new parts did we receive, how many new pieces of equipment have we received, and how many engineering changes have been processed. All we have to do is look at those last NIN, new item notice numbers, or the engineering change notice numbers, and we can address those questions very easily and intelligently. Now, the last exhibit on this page addresses the obsolescence program. And an item that is obsolete, as I said earlier, and I'm referring now to a spare part, should not be in the storeroom. But I imagine if I went into your storeroom and you didn't have an obsolescence program, I will find, and you're going to find that we do have obsolete items in the storeroom. They're taking up space, it's costing us money to carry them, and the 2 reasons that they are in the storeroom is, number 1, you maybe do not have an engineering change notice system that I identified a moment ago, and you do not have an adequately designed and implemented obsolescence program where you're going to utilize the spare parts where used list. So one of the data elements that is going to be a key to the elimination of obsolescence is going to be discussed in detail in section 3 on page number 4. But when we move into section 3, we're going to show you how to put together a equipment spare parts list and how that equipment spare parts list can be translated into a spare parts where used list to support the process of engineering changes and the obsolescence program. So without further ado, let's now move into section number 3, the spare parts where used list.